This message has been brought to you from the Landscape Certified Contractors Association. If you would like to be a part of our membership, please go to our website, irrigatortech.com.
So as I mentioned earlier, the other more significant, or I won't say more significant, the other significant item that we're dealing with, and certainly been dealing with in the last few weeks, is the governor's executive order and the state board regulations regarding the required reduction in water use that we have here in California. I think particularly we are sensitive in the Inland Empire and in Riverside County because it seems like the way the state board is going to promulgate that regulation will hit us disproportionately harder than the rest of the state, unfortunately because of climate and other reasons that we don't agree are necessarily fair and equitable. We've been working on that issue, and the water agencies have been very, very busy responding to the state board's proposed regulation. In fact, the speakers that we have talking about Tim Barr, the Water Conservation Manager for Western, but also we're going to have some question and answer with Elizabeth Lovestead, who's a Senior Civil Engineer with Eastern, and Lisa Keelan, who's Director of Water Resources for Western as well. I will tell you, both Tim and Elizabeth have been on 24/7 duty for the last week and a half. We've had to respond to the state board's deadlines for comments on their proposed regulation. They've been part of a larger technical group in Southern California that has actually put together an alternative compliance model and a very, very well put together model framework that would replace the state board's framework that considers things like housing density and type, considers things like climate, considers things like what have you done in water conservation before 2013, which the current state model does not consider, and in which Riverside County is being disproportionately penalized for because we were early adopters on water conservation. We do have lower density housing than San Francisco, which basically gets a kind of a free pass on this because they have very high density housing. So these guys have worked on that with this group and put together, I think is one of the recognized the most significant sets of comments in this completely well-developed alternative model and submitted that to the state board by Tuesday's deadline. So we're obviously going to be advocating and following up on that, but I think you need to recognize that these two individuals in particular who've worked on that technical model are really representing our region quite well, and I think we need to give them a little round of applause. So with that, I'm going to put them on the spot a little bit, and Tim is going to start out and give us an overview. I've kind of covered very briefly, but he will go into more detail over on the governor's executive order and the proposed state board regulations. So Tim, thank you.
So it's gloomy out. I'm doomed. I'm going to talk about another disaster called the State Water Resources Control Board. So we really owe a lot of credit to Paul as well because Elizabeth and I, along with folks from Irvine Ranch and Molson Miguel and other agencies, are really just coalescing the idea, but it's really Paul who's pushing and getting a lot of attention. So it is a team effort. And I'm going to go through where we are, what the governor has requested, how the state board has responded to that, and then we'll open up to questions on local response. So everybody's seen this slide before. 93% of the state is in either severe, extreme, or exceptional drought. We do have an issue here in the state of California. Going back, certainly not 200 years, I'm going to go back 2 years. In January 2014, the governors declared a drought emergency and asked for voluntary conservation, asked for voluntary 20% across the state of California. In April, he redoubled his efforts. I'm not really sure what redoubled means, but asked for significant conservation. And in summer of 2014, the state board came up with reporting requirements. Agencies had to report on their previous month's activity and use a metric called residential gallons per capita. We were required to, on the 15th of every month, show what our production was and provide a reporting metric that can be used locally to judge progress from 1 month or 1 season or 1 year to another year, if done correctly. It cannot be used to compare one agency to another because there are substantially different demographics, climate, densities, all the things that Paul talked about. And the state board themselves recognize this, yet we're moving forward to do just that. So agencies reporting, we're doing everything that the state board asked. We were reporting residential gallons per cap. We're reporting our production numbers, and we were moving forward. It was very difficult for some of the agencies in the room here to show substantial progress because progress had been done for years already. In Western's case, we'd seen a reduction of already 28% before we started this report. In Eastern, there's studies out that shows the rate structure reduced between 15 and 18%. So a lot of work had been done in the Inland Empire already. So it was very difficult to get that next level of reduction. Yet the state still wanted 20. In March of 2015, the state board added additional reporting requirements. We were now reporting on commercial water use. We were now reporting on, we added a new provision, a new restriction that said, thou shalt not irrigate during rainfall or 48 hours within rainfall. Okay, so there's another change. And we were asking restaurants not to serve water, and we were asking hotels to do pretty much what they're already doing, put tent cards out there and say, if you want to keep your towels an extra couple of days, we won't honor them. Boom. April 1st, governor comes out and says he wants a 25% statewide mandatory reduction. Okay, that's reasonable. We can work towards a goal. What the state board interpreted was this 25% reduction, and in the governor's executive order, it does say, consider residential gallons per capita per day to achieve these reductions. What it doesn't say is that thou shalt infringe more harshly on inland areas. That's what the state board has done. The commercial and industrial reductions need to be consistent with the local reductions. So if a local area has a 10% reduction, they're looking for consistent reductions in commercial, industrial, and institutional. How we get there is up to us. The state board is not clear on that. The state board has said we will prohibit the irrigation of turf grass in public medians if it's irrigated with potable water. The state board has said that new construction cannot irrigate landscape unless it is either recycled water or irrigated with drip or microspray irrigation. We are directed to develop conservation rate structures. Many of us in the room already have those rate structures. The monthly reporting will remain, and enforcement will continue for the next, if approved by the state board, next month, May 6th. It will go into effect June 1st, and for the next 270 days, we'll be under a new regime of enforcement. So, looking into what the state board's first framework that came out on April 7th said, it took a look at 1 month of 1 year, September 2014, and it said, we will put you into conservation categories based on that 1 month of 1 year. That's kind of like saying to an avocado farmer, okay, you go irrigate on Monday, I'll come back and read your meter on Tuesday, and for the next 365 days, I will tell you exactly what you used on that one day. Completely ridiculous. 1 month of 1 year does not represent the water use of a region. So they also said, if you are in a low residential GPCD value, your reductions will be less, 10%. If you have a high residential GPCD, your mandated reductions will be higher. So many of the agencies in Western Riverside County and Riverside County in general were in the upper categories, 25 and 35%. Actually, all of them were in the 25 and the 35%. The coastal communities were in the 10%. So there were 135 agencies in inland regions of California at 35% subsidizing those with 10% reductions, based on 1 month of 1 year. We were told that failure to comply with this provision would cost us $10,000 a day. We were asked to provide comments by April 13th, so we jumped on it. We spent hours upon hours crafting comments, and a lot of comments went in. Almost more than 250 comments were received by the deadline of April 13th. So the state board considered, they tell us, our comments. They came out with a revised framework, and this framework now, instead of looking at 1 month of 1 year, averaged 3 months of 1 year, the warmest months of the year, and put us into different categories. These categories are, some would say, more fair, more equitable. I would disagree. It gives 8 categories, from 8% through 36%, and with 4% increments. There was a 9th category reserved for those that had done the most, apparently, and it was a 4% reduction. So many of us in this room now we're between 28 and 36%. So our request for reduced demand went up. There was no adjustment for climate. There was no credit for past conservation activities prior to 2013. The base period was set at 2013, so we have to reduce. Right now, Western is in the vote, in the 32% vote. Progress, we went from 35 to 32. To get a 32% reduction, we have to reduce our demands from 2013 levels, and that is just going to be catastrophic. There was no credit given for our ratepayers and our agencies forward thinking to develop local supplies, develop recycled water, develop groundwater desalinization, to do these things that drought-proof us. As an example, Metropolitan has asked the member agencies to reduce by 15%. That's a big difference from the 35% that some of us in the room have. So, because what Metropolitan does is they give you credit for past conservation, they give you credit for local supply production. So, the next comments were due April 22nd. I looked at them last night. Again, it's more than 200 comments going in. There was a coalition of folks that were comprised of Eastern Municipal Water District, Western Municipal Water District, City of Corona, the Rancho California Water District, Elsinore Valley Municipal Water District, Fallbrook Utilities District, Rainbow, Molten Miguel, Irvine Ranch, the Southern California Water Committee, and I'm sure I'm forgetting people. Aqua supported our letter. There were a number of folks that actually jumped on board, and we have submitted a new proposal. So this is the 9 categories. We talked about those. So specific reductions for this area. All of us in the room are in tier 7, 8, and 9. 28 through 36% reductions based on our 3 warmest months of production. All agencies in this room have a much lower production in wintertime, so if you average this over a larger time, we would not be in these categories at all. So next steps, we have submitted our comments. We are expecting the formal notice to come out next week on the 28th. The State Water Resources Control Board will conduct their public hearing and adopt something on May 5th or 6th. At that hearing, the Office of Administrative Law has 10 days. The reporting requirements begin, we have to report in July for our production June 1 through June 30, 2015, and thou shalt be at the mandated reduction or else. With that, that's enough doom and gloom.
So we are going to have a chance. Obviously, Tim's not walking away too quickly here. We also have, and we want to talk about this, and so our other 3 panelists down at the end of the table, including Tim, we'll answer any questions that you have. So obviously, we have from Eastern Elizabeth Lovestead, who's already introduced, and then Lisa Cleland. So I think we can do kind of an open Q&A right now, if there are any questions anybody has. And I don't think we have a portable microphone. So maybe the three of you can, oh, do we have a portable microphone? Great. Okay, let's get that working. Maybe that buzzing feedback won't start again. Maybe not. Okay. With that, are there any questions that we have? Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, please stand up.
Assuming that the targets given are what we see today or anything near that, or whatever the targets are, what processes do you see being used to implement that so that customers begin to sort of
both Eastern and Western have allocation-based tiered rate systems, and so both of us have water shortage contingency plans that heavily rely on those tiered rate systems. And so what we would do is start to cut back the size of the allocations that are
Use the mic.
I don't know if that's any better. But we have allocation-based tiered rate structures, and so our water shortage contingency plans rely heavily on those. And so we will reduce the allocations that our customers have for water use. And so what will happen is that if they exceed those allocations, they're going to pay a much higher rate for water, and we're going to use that to encourage compliance.
so the allocation in each tier will be reduced down, or certain tiers will be reduced. Your allocation will get squeezed basically.
We're going to eliminate we kind of have a inefficient tier. We're going to eliminate that tier, and we're going to reduce the outdoor tier.
Got it. Okay.
Western's going to do the exact same thing. We have a very similar rate structure and a similar shortage contingency plan. And we will, the proposal right now is if the state board keeps us at 32%, is that we will take to our board a reduction of 40% outdoor irrigation. We'll reduce outdoor budget by 40% to guarantee we get 32%.
Thank you.
So, I'm still unclear. I read the fact sheet that the state put out, and I'm still unclear about how we deal with commercial, industrial, institutional, schools and things like that. In Rancho, most of our high schools and fields, they're either synthetic or they're recycled water. That's fine. But our industrial process people, I can ask them not to water outside, which they have pretty extensive outdoor landscaping. That might help. But I feel really concerned about saying, stop doing business or reduce your business. What do I do with restaurants? Say, hey, you can only let in 75% of the people that you normally do. The restaurants are mandated by the health department. They got to change the water in their sinks, every so many hours. They can't extend that. They'll get closed. So I don't get, and that's just on that side. Rancho delivers 40% of our water to our agricultural customers. We are not an urban agency. We are an urban agricultural agency. And I don't even know how Rainbow gets in the urban category. 80% of their water is ag water. They're an agricultural agency. So the 11-year-old that thought up this original plan clearly wasn't versed in the complexities, and they're thinking about someplace. And I guess it's just a soapbox. I don't really have a question here other than, how can we get the message across that there are big agricultural entities in Southern California. And that maybe the governor could do something practical, like, maybe put a meter on the Capitol building, or point people to the Coastal Commission or the Regional Water Quality Control Boards that would approve desal, would not make it impossible or take 15 years to get a project permitted to do something that would actually create a new source of water. But what are the suggestions that you might have to the state regarding like agricultural customers, or if this goes the way I see it, that this will be a huge impact on our industrial and commercial bases throughout the state, not just in Southern California.
So for the agricultural, the last proposal by the state board did allow agencies to exclude agricultural or resubmit data if you have agricultural information. So they did put in that provision. For the commercial industrial institution, again, for our agency, we're focusing on outdoors. That's where we really need to find the savings, and try to minimize the impact as much as we can on again the indoor and the economy and those agencies. But there are some agencies out there that are going to struggle with that more. You have more industrial, you have more commercial. That is a big concern.
First of all, I'd like to say hear, hear to everything you just said. But I would beg to differ on the 11-year-old. I think it's probably a lower intellectual level than that. But sorry, that's me. That's my personal statement. Let me qualify that. I want to pick up on another thing that you said, which I think is another really critical point to this. And you were saying the point about developing desal. Unfortunately, in this case, if you're an agency that has gone to the effort and the expense of developing your own local supplies, that did not matter. Those are cut back too. I will use San Diego County Water Authority as an example, who has taken great measures at great expense, and their customers have paid for that, to develop ocean desal, and they are cut back just as much. So you developed ocean desal, you did conservation programs, it doesn't matter. Your GPCD is high, you will cut back more than everybody else. So all of our efforts and our customers' money that have gone into the development of these local supplies, into conservation programs, doesn't matter. And we're obviously upset about that.
If there's one thing I could leave with you, it's this. It's GPCD is not a measure of efficiency. It's important to realize that gallons per capita per day is not a measure of efficiency. Just because a coastal community has 100 gallons per capita per day, they have postage-sized landscapes, more population. It does not mean that that's an efficient use of water. So if you're talking amongst yourselves and to people you know, get the word out. GPCD is not a measure of efficiency.
I also just wanted to add that the model, we actually did send a model to the state that considered more of the long-term conservation. It actually took into account, back in 2010, we all developed goals to reduce water through 2020, and we went back to that baseline that we all said several years ago that we've been working on. And so instead of just using 2013 as a reduction point, we went back to those baselines that we, again, they were mandated by the state. We put them in our urban water management plans, and we've been working for that goal for 5 years already. And we did submit a model to the state that takes those into account. It does give the 25% reduction from 2013.
Bringing this back to the delta, for just one fraction of a second, I found it interesting. Metropolitan did some calculations and looked at this. If the tunnels had been in place a year and a half ago, we had this big, I don't know if you remember the heavy rains we had a year ago December. We think we have an additional 1 million acre feet in storage if the tunnels had been in.
Question in the back, yes, sir.
Right now, there's a big knee-jerk reaction, obviously, to new development, saying, if we're doing all these cutbacks, why are we having new development? But of course, if you cut off new residential development in this region, it would have catastrophic economic impacts. Can you speak to smart policy moving forward with new development, given the stage alerts that are being put in place, and what makes sense?
Development needs to be smart. So clearly, builders, county, city, water agencies need to work together to provide a new standard, a new way of installing landscapes in new construction. Gone are the days, I believe, of turf in new construction, except in areas where it's functional. The backyard of our homes, the parks and school playgrounds, those kinds of things, ballparks. I think we need to be smarter with our new construction, and I think in the governor's executive order, the use of drip irrigation for front yards is appropriate, and we can do a better job. And I think we need to work together to get there. I can't see agencies continuing to pay $2 a square foot to remove turf and have new turf go into new construction. That's got to change. So something's got to happen there.
One of the items that we're looking at is water offsets. My name's Nathan Miller, I'm with the Building Industry Association. So offsets for new construction that help invest in turf removal and invest in whatever needs to be done to bring in recycled water. So I mean, those are some of the things that the building industry is looking at, and clearly they're looking to partner with water districts. I just kind of want to get that conversation.
And maybe I can respond to that. We looked at this issue at Eastern. We reviewed our policy associated with new development last year and potential impacts from new development on water supplies. And the one thing I think people lose sight of is that when we consider new development, we're looking at long-term planning. If you put a graph up of the droughts that we've had, these droughts are episodic. Every once in a while, every few years, whether it's once a decade, we will have these shortage periods. This is a fairly severe one, but if you go back to 77, you go back to 91, we've had these shortage periods. What we've done as water agencies, though, is put together water resources master plans that are based on build-out of the jurisdictional general plans. So we are planning the water supplies, whether in our case it's additional brackish groundwater desalination, additional water recycling, to be able to plan and have those water supplies available for new development. If you look at the requirements for us to do water supply assessments, we don't look at 1 year out. We look at 20 years plus. We look at single and multiple dry years, and we size and have our water resources facilities capable of being able to accommodate that growth in the future. However, on the other side of it, we also, in Eastern, we will look at new development applications, and if they are consistent with the jurisdictional general plan in terms of their water use, we are fine with those going forward. If they substantially exceed that, in other words, there's upzoning or other changes that really multiply out the water use for a given parcel, we require that the developer and builder mitigate that back down. And do that by some of the things that you talked about, doing extraordinary conservation in other areas, looking at changing and zoning of a set of other property they might own, to basically do an offset. So, I think from our perspective, is the policy is we can't stop growth, nor do we want to stop growth in Riverside County. It's a vibrant part of our economy, but we need to do it very intelligently, and we need to have opportunities for builders to go forward, and if they're putting in projects that have greater water needs, to be able to mitigate that back to what we're planning for. So I think that's kind of the approach that we're taking. And if you talk the public through that, I think they kind of understand that a little bit more, and they realize. And as I said, the building industry is an important part of what we're doing here in Riverside County, and we certainly need to support that and have planned for those water supplies in the future. And when I say that the public understands that, it doesn't mean everybody, obviously. And there are those who are going to say, hey, we're in a drought, you should stop development. But we certainly don't think that's necessary or appropriate. Yes, sir.
If this sounds naive, I apologize, but will the recent appeals court decision on the San Capistrano case affect your tiered plans for conservation tools? No.
No.
Okay.
No.
Good. Good. Okay.
I have a question.
Maybe a little bit on that, sorry, and I don't mean to kind of, this came up, I was, had an opportunity yesterday to speak to a group of, in a bond buyers meeting of people who purchased our bonds. And most of those people are in New York, and back east. They read the paper and they say, oh my gosh, Southern California and California is completely running out of water. The San Juan Capistrano case is going to be completely flips over your ability to charge tier rates. What are you going to do? And so I think this is a kind of top of mind issue for a lot of people, even across the United States. It's kind of interesting. But I think if you look at the San Juan Capistrano case, it did not say that, or didn't declare that tiered rates are illegal. It did not do that. I think what the situation with the San Juan Capistrano case was their administrative record was very, very poor. They had a multi-tiered rate structure that was an allocation-based rate structure. They did not do good cost allocation per tiers. They kind of did it in the aggregate. They put some costs in there that were not necessarily well justified. And so the administrative record that they presented to the courts, both the lower court and the appellate court, was not very good. And I think most people in the industry thought these guys are going to lose anyway. But I think when you look at the case, there's actually in the ruling language, and I'll read a quote here, it says, tiered rates in Proposition 218 are thoroughly compatible, so long as the rates reasonably reflect the cost of service to the parcel. So I think, again, it goes back to how well our agencies have put together our cost of service studies. I think we're very comfortable in the way that we've done that. And so I don't want to leave anybody with the impression that the Stanwell and Capistrano case, because of that, tiered rates are going to end forever. That being said, on the other side of it, Proposition 218 is not very well written. I think if you look at the key issue in Proposition 218 is that, and I'll quote this, the amount of fee or charge imposed on any parcel as an incident of property ownership shall not exceed the proportional cost of service to the parcel. And that last two words, the parcel, is the problematic part. And even if you look at the Capistrano ruling, while they said, yes, you need to generally, follow cost of service principles, you need to assign costs on a tier-by-tier basis, if you read all the way to the end of the ruling, it says, but that's not saying that you have to have a different rates for 223 Elm Street than you have for 224 Elm Street. However, if you look at Proposition 218, that's exactly what it says, because it says the parcel. And so that is a problematic language in there, and I will tell you, if you look at the quick reaction from Governor Brown over that ruling, and basically saying, hey, this ruling is tying water agencies' hands, we've received inquiries as other agencies, and I think kind of preeminent legal people in allocation-based rates are saying, the governor's office is saying, give us language to do a legislative fix. And if we can do a short-term legislative fix, to the extent the governor puts together some sort of future ballot initiative, they would do the constitutional amendment side of it too. So I think this is the good thing about this is the Capistrano decision is going to precipitate a clarification of Proposition 218, initially statutorily, I believe, but I think ultimately through some sort of supplemental clarifying constitutional amendment. Did that answer your question?
Absolutely. Thank you, Paul.
I'm just curious, Paul, on the 250 comments that you guys have sent up there, thank you for, on behalf of all of this. Do they have a snowball chance in Sacramento of going through? Or have you heard anything back that indicate, hey, this is a good idea or that? Have you guys heard any, signal from them?
I'll let these guys handicap that one.
So there were previous comment sessions that fell on deaf ears. We were planning for the worst, but we're hoping for the best. We did have a conference call with state board staff, and they were cautiously accepting of our alternative model. That doesn't mean they're going to accept it. It just means that we were on a call with state board staff. They took the time to listen to us. A number of folks have analyzed it and weighed in and supported it, so we're hopeful that they'll see the possibilities.
I think I'll also add that Randy Record, who is on our board, and of course the chairman of Metropolitan, had a one-on-one meeting with Felicia Marcus and expressed his deep concern for the inequity in the current regulations. And I think that hopefully had some effect, but again, he communicated with her. He wrote a letter on behalf of Metropolitan that communicated some of these issues. We put together a fact sheet that he gave her and walked her through in the meeting about some of the inequities in the currently proposed regulation. So hopefully that resonated as well. And she's the chair of the State Water Resources Control Board. Okay, one more. Any more questions? Everybody's exhausted, right? I mean, it's a big topic. With that, I want to thank our panelists. Let's give them a hand. So, in our spirit of wanting to end right on time here, we're a couple minutes early. I just want to note that our next meeting is Friday, June 26th.